continuing our study, or kind of a journey through Genesis, I guess would be a way of looking at it. We're trying not to look at every single verse here, but in chunks and see what some of the, what are some of the things that we can glean from all of that. Last week, if you remember, we finished. Nathan read off all of the different, all the different families of all of Noah's children, and then we went from there into the Tower of Babel, and we took quite a bit of time in the Tower of Babel, and we talked about how the Lord now dispersed the people because that is what He wanted from the very beginning. And we compared that to how He has dispersed us in the new church, in the New Testament church that we saw in Acts, and how He disperses, how He still does the same thing with His church today when we get very complacent and apathetic, and we kind of hunker down in one place. That He has His ways of gracefully and mercifully prodding us to be able to go into all the nations. And so we finished there. So that puts us at the 10th verse. And then here we are in the 10th verse, and interesting, there's going to be a little bit of repetition in this 10th verse, in that we already got some of Shem's ancestry, but now we're going to see it once again. And there's a reason for this. There is a reason that this is coming up one more time, and that is because it is introducing us to the next section. It would be like as you take a look at various books, whether they be fiction or nonfiction literature, oftentimes you'll see the books will be broken down in chapters, but not just chapters. Those chapters sometimes are bunched into certain sections. So you remember having to create outlines when you were kids in school. I see somebody shaking her head. You must not have liked doing outlines. But really, we see Genesis kind of formed that way, in that it's not just in chapters, but it would be in sections, and we're now transitioning to the next section, and that would be that we have moved from Adam to Noah, and now to Abraham. And so we're going to kind of move our way now through the various patriarchs of the church. Well, interesting. Now think about this. We talked about this with Adam, and that was Adam was not just a husband to Eve and father of children. Do you remember what else we said Adam was?
The beginning of the Messianic line?
Well, he was also he was the high priest. So he was the one that kind of was the one that oversaw the church, right? And so then from there we moved to Noah and his family, and all of the rest of the people were heathen and killed in the flood. So Noah would be husband and father and what? High priest. Well, what are we going to see now with Abram? We're going to see the exact same thing. And the point being is that we're not just seeing the movement or the journey of Adam or Noah or Abraham. We are seeing the journey and the movement of the church. And that's what's going on here. And we're going to see how God is going to take His church, He's going to gather His church, He's going to build His church, and He's going to move His church. And so I want you to kind of just keep that in mind as we look at this. That would be kind of an overarching view of what's happening here. It's not just about Abraham. It's about God's church. So, does somebody want to read so that I can eat my donut from Otto? Does somebody want to read from 10 through 26?
How do you say Arphaxad?
Nathan, how would you say that?
I think it's Arpachshad.
Arpachshad. You could say Arpachshad, Arpachshad, either way, but Arpachshad would be really good. Just make something up.
This is the account of Shem. 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arpachshad. And after he became the father of Arpachshad, Shem lived 500 years and had other sons and daughters. When Arpachshad had lived 35 years, he became the father of Shelah. And after he became the father of Shelah, Arpachshad lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Shelah had lived 30 years, he became the father of Eber. And after he became the father of Eber, Shelah lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Eber had lived 34 years, he became the father of Peleg.
Peleg.
And after he became the father of Peleg, Eber lived 430 years and had other sons and daughters. When Peleg had lived 30 years, he became the father of Reu. And after he became the father of Reu, Peleg lived 209 years and had other sons and daughters. When Reu lived 32 years, he became the father of Serah. And after he became the father of Serah, Reu lived 207 years and had other sons and daughters. When Serah had lived 30 years, he became the father of Nahor. And after he became the father of Nahor, Serah lived 200 years and had other sons and daughters. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he became the father of Terah. And after he became the father of Terah, Nahor lived 119 years. Well, they're not living as long. And had other sons and daughters. After Terah had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran.
Okay. So, again, just working our way through a genealogy, we see, once again, as we saw in Moses' writings earlier, that it's done in this, in a rhythmic way as he speaks it. So each one of these sections were the same, and that would make it easier for it to be spoken orally and to be remembered, because it was done in verse like this. And the significance of it is it gets us to Terah, and that is where Moses wants to take us, because it is Terah who is the father of Abram. And that is, again, we see this as a transition. And we see Abram and Nahor and Haran. Now, Haran is the father of Lot. So that's something you want to kind of keep in mind. And we're going to see here, as Haran dies, we're going to see this is why Lot is going to follow with Abram. It helps us to understand a little bit how all of these folks are connected. So, those are the and now we're going to move into the generations once again of Terah, and we're going to have just somewhat of a repetition here, but then Moses will add a little bit more information. So if somebody want to read 27 to the end of the chapter.
Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran, and Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred, in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarah, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren, and she had no child. Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. And they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran.
Okay. So here we see now what's going to bring us to the next section, and that is going to be these generations of Terah, and it is there that we start to get some of the other characters that are going to be a part of the history of God's people, and also in some cases the history of the church of God too. So we get introduced now to Abram and his wife Sarai, and we'll know later we're going to see that God will change their name, and so we're going to see that later on, and then we're going to see that Sarai was barren, that she is not able to have a child. That will be significant, of course, in the history as we come up, and then we're going to see here one of the that Abram Terah is going to take Abram and Lot and Haran and Haran's grandson and Sarai and a daughter and all of these people, and they're going to go from Ur of the Chaldeans to the land of Canaan. And then on the way to the land of Canaan, they're going to stop in the land of Haran. And we saw the descendants of Haran before, and about which would be the father of Lot. The significance of this, though, is he's moving from Ur of the Chaldeans to where God is going to begin to establish his church, his people. He is taking them out of a pagan nation. Ur of the Chaldeans was a nation that was they worshiped idols. And all of these people that are leaving here were all idol worshipers. Even though this is going to be the beginning of the church is going to be built upon the descendants of Abraham. Abraham was a pagan. Abraham was an idol worshiper. And God is going to take him out of his idol worshiping, and he is going to bring him into faith. It is not Abraham. It is not that God is waiting for Abraham to come of faith, and then he's going to lead him to a new place. God is going to lead him, and he is going to give him faith. And that is really significant in this text. Now, Ur of where the Chaldean people were, the city of Ur, this would be the predating of Babylon. That would have been where Babylon was, or will eventually be. And so there's some significance there as we know, of course, the history of Babylon. We know how Babylon is still referred to this day and how it will be referred, how it's referred even all the way through the book of Revelation. Well, here we already get a glimpse of it before the name of the city is changed from Babylon. It was originally Ur. And so that is going to, and that's this. The other last thing I wanted to share with you that we see in here is note how, as we've worked our way through the 11 chapters, how the ages of the people have gotten lesser and less and less. Is that the right way to say it? Yeah. Less and less. And this would be, this is part of the sin-filled, being in a sin-filled world. And we're going to see that the age of individuals are going to significantly drop. You know, it's already moved from about 1,000 years down to a few hundred now. And the same thing, we're going to see that with then Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Moses, and all as we move on. So we are going to be in, now we're only a few hundred years of life and not 1,000 years. So it's dropped about 60%, and so this is where we are. That's where we're at when we end 11. And so now we are now going to move to the next section of Genesis, and that is going to be as God will now begin to form His church and the promises that are with that. We're going to see messianic promises in here. We're going to see, we're going to see miraculous, God performing miraculous acts, all of those kind of things. So, we come to chapter 12. Will somebody want to read the first 3 verses of 12?
Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." Okay.
So, here, of course, we see these words spoken directly to Abram. Go and note what God says. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to mine, is really what he is saying. Isn't that interesting how God has created the heavens and the earth, and all of this would be his, and yet as he speaks in these words to Abram, he says to Abram, go from your country to mine. What's the significance of that? Or, what are we seeing here?
Maybe going from idolatry into
Yes.
Go a different world of believing God.
Exactly. I want you to go from your unbelief to believe. And then in the New Testament, where did we see that? Where did we see Jesus say that?
Whenever he would say, "Your faith has made you well."
Yeah, you're right. That was I guess I'm thinking of a specific time. It would be on the evening of the resurrection. It was in the upper room, and then we had the evening of resurrection, and then we had the next week after that. They're back in the upper room, and we have Thomas Do you remember Thomas? Do you remember what Jesus' words were to Thomas? Stop your unbelief and believe. And this is the same thing that God speaks to. So this would be the Word of God, the pre-incarnate Christ, right? And he speaks to Abram and he says, stop your unbelief and believe. Go from your unbelief to believe. And when you do that, this is really not words of if you do that. These are more words when you do that. I will make of you a great nation. What does that mean? What does it mean, I will make of you a great nation?
You have many children?
Pardon me?
You would have many children?
Yeah, that's really all that. I mean, we hear the word making you of a great nation. We hear this in politics right now, right? Making America great again, kind of thing. And we don't think of it as being growing into a large people. We have a different understanding of that word. But here, what he's saying is, I'm going to make you a great nation. I'm going to make you a large nation, a nation that is so large you cannot fathom it. That type of a statement. Well, that is very interesting because we heard in the transition section that Abram's wife was barren. And yet God says, when you go from unbelief to belief,
Great things will happen.
yes, it's going to all explode, that type of thing. And I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will dishonor those. And to him who dishonors you, I will curse. And so here, as he says these words to Abram, I really want you to understand that Abram would be at this point in as we kind of understand, as we look at this, just understand Abram's would be another name for the church. Okay? Be another name for the church. I want you to go from unbelief and belief into my home, into my place. And so as a people of faith, we become a church, and as my church, as my people, I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will dishonor those who will curse you. That type of thing. So again, it reminds us of Jesus' words when he speaks of the church. And he speaks, what did he say regarding the gates of hell? What did he say regarding the gates of hell in comparison to the church?
Something about shall not prevail.
They cannot prevail against you, the church. So I will bless you, and I will curse any that curse you. I will prevent. I will punish. I will destroy any that he's promised the fact that his church will live forever. He's told us that he who believes in me will never die. And so as he speaks of his church, we are reminded that it is all about God's church, whether it be in the Old Testament or today in the New Testament. The only reason there is still air, oxygen, and life on this earth is because Christ's church is here. It is the only reason. All of this, all of creation, everything that is beautiful is for you. It's all about you. And of course it is all the families on the earth are going to be blessed, and they're going to be blessed because of you, the church. Life still exists because of you, the church. that I can't tell you that enough. As long as the church has a role here on this earth, the earth will continue. As soon as the role of the church is completed on this earth, there is no more need for this earth and all of creation. It is all about you. God is blessing you, and God will bless others through you. That's what he is saying here. I will bless those who bless you. So those, when you as the church proclaim that word of God, God blesses that by creating faith in those that hear your word. You know, that type of thing. He protects his church. And we're going to see that right from the beginning here, as he takes Abram out of the land of unbelief and move him into the land of belief. And we're going to see this continue to go. And so here is a man of unbelief, Abram, right? An idol worshiper, and God says to him, go. Now, one of the things we're going to learn about Abram is Abram was relatively well-to-do. Abraham had a lot of stuff. Abraham would have needed a lot of moving trunks. Abraham had family and stuff and servants, and God told him to move. He didn't tell him where to go. He just said, go. And that brings us to the next section, from 4 through 9. Does somebody want to read that?
Abram left as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh and Shinar. At that time, Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord, who had appeared to him. From there he went on toward the hills east of Bethel, and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord, and called on the name of the Lord. And Abram set out and continued toward the
Negev, yeah. Okay. So, here's the significance. God called Abram out of unbelief and into belief. And there were the first 3 words of verse 4. And Abram went. Okay? So, because, yeah. You know, imagine me coming home one day and saying to Robin, all right, I want you to pack up everything that you have, and we're going to go. And Robin would just say, or she wouldn't even say where, she would just pack up and go. Like, that's going to happen. Like, that's going to happen. And I would think she would be, at the very least, curious, you know, where? Why? You know, for what, any of that type of stuff. We don't see that. When God calls Abram to faith, Abram follows. And it's that's a miracle that happens. This is the miracle, and he does as the Lord told him, and he brings his family, he brings everybody with him. So, when God calls the church to proclaim the word and to go into all nations and all of that, what do we see in the church? We see the church responding to the Lord's call and bringing their families with them. You know, it is what, I mean, look at what's happened just in this room. As we see, the Morgansons and the Kirstens and the Cunies and all that. You know, as you followed the Lord and His calling, you brought your families with you. You brought them into the Lord's house. You made sure that they were in Sunday schools and even in some cases church, the elementary Christian schools and all of those kind of things. And you brought them all with you. And this is what we are seeing with Abram, is that he's going to bring the whole people with him. And what do we see is each place that he comes to, where the Lord says to him as he's passing through, he says, "This I'm giving to you. This one I'm giving to you. This one I'm giving to you." What is Abram's immediate response? Yeah, sets up a place of worship. That would be, so again, what do we see with Abram? Abram is the high priest. He is the one who sets up the place of worship for all. It isn't just that Abram is going to set up an altar and worship there. He sets this altar up for all of those that are the church that is gathered with him to worship the Lord. And he sets it up wherever it is that he goes, and wherever it is he will still go. I think it's really a remarkable picture from a man who was an idol worshiper, who God said, "Leave your unbelief and believe," and he just did. So this is really something special. All right. Let's go to verse 10 through the end of the chapter.
Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai his wife, "I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me if they will let me live. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake." When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princess of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. And for her sake he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister so that I took her for my wife? Now that here is your wife, take her and go." And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had.
Okay. All right. Interesting section. Of course, we see the famine in the land, and so they go to Egypt. Isn't it interesting as we look at the early church, as we look at through the Old Testament patriarchs, what happens when there's a famine in all the land? Everybody heads to Egypt. Yeah, and that's really what happens throughout all of the, with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all of these. This is very commonplace. And that is because, and we talked about this through one of our earlier texts, it's really because of the location of Egypt and the fact that even in the midst of in the midst of famine and suffering, Egypt's land is such that it is always rich and green. The way the waters flow there, the way that the land is laid out, it is always a place where food is plentiful. And so we see that. So he goes to Egypt. He's going to enter into Egypt, and now Abram is afraid. Abram, this shows some distrust in God, as he says to Sarai, "Tell them you are my sister." He doesn't trust when the Lord sends him through Egypt that the Lord is at his side. And so Abram tries to take matters upon himself. And when he takes matters upon himself, there are consequences. There are, as my mentor would always say, there are implications to everything that we do. And the implication here is, we don't notice it as much to Abram and Sarai and to Abram's people. It looks like Abram benefited from it, but the implications are that it was harmful to the Egyptians and to Pharaoh. That deception caused Pharaoh to act upon a temptation that he shouldn't have acted upon, and for his sake, and now he is. We see sorrow and a repentant heart from Pharaoh, and so here we see that there is a punishment for Pharaoh and the Egyptians with great plagues. For something true Pharaoh did, but for something that that Abram would be equally as guilty of doing. And that is, his deception caused the sin of another. Remember Jesus' words as he talks to his church, talks to people, about the punishment or the woe to someone who causes another one to sin.
Be better than a millstone.
It'd be better than a millstone be thrown around your neck. Yeah. So that same thing can certainly be said about Abram here, in that you cause another one to sin. And that's exactly what Abram does. But here we don't see Abram called to repentance in this. It doesn't mean that he wasn't, but we don't see him called to repentance. What we see really is just the outside story of what happened. But we don't know. We don't know if Pharaoh became a believer. We don't know if Pharaoh wasn't a believer. Might this be what leads all of the pharaohs in the history to follow to not follow God, to not be followers of God, to be enemies of God? Could it be that this is what kind of begins that process? We don't know, of course, but...
Or is this King Tut's father who worships the one God?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He changed all of Egypt's worship to a single God.
Yeah. Yeah, but he changed it to a single God, but it wasn't the God of...
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, was this, there would be the other hand. Is this, is this is what happened here through Abram, was this led or justified by God? That it became a punishment toward Pharaoh for his unbelief. And so, but that's really very interesting. You can look at it either way when we see this. We see here that Pharaoh is aware that God is displeased with him, our text says that it's not really like the same plagues that God would call upon Egypt later on, but we don't know. But they're severe enough that they, at the very least, would affect the conscience of the king. He would know of God's displeasure with him. So those things would, this is what is going on there. But again, this is Abraham did deceive Pharaoh in here. We come to chapter 13 now, and what we're going to see is we're going to see Abraham and we're going to see Lot go two different directions. And so, why don't we, somebody want to read the first 13 verses?
So Abram went up, go ahead.
So Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the Negev. Now Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver and gold, and he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. And Lot, who went with Abraham, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together. For their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. More?
Sure.
And Abram said to Lot, let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, I will go, and I will go to the right, or if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley, and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. More?
Okay, no, that's good. Okay, so, what we see here is, of course, Abram and his nephew, Lot, and they both are very, very wealthy. Well, in that culture, wealth was really not necessarily in money in the bank. Your wealth was based upon your herds, the size of your herds, the size of your the animals that you have. And so what happens is one of the reasons that they can't be together when you have two that have as big of herds as possible, the land can't support them. Okay. okay? There's not enough grazing land for it. And so now all of a sudden you're going to have your herd, you know, those that are taking care of your herds, they're going to be fighting over all of this stuff. It wasn't necessarily because of a jealousy or something along those lines. I mean, you'll see that when you see wealth versus wealth, you know, that it'd be easy to think of it in the form of jealousy, but this is more in the form of just
Not enough space for the both of us.
just, yeah, there's not enough room for both of them. So Abram says to Lot,